All right, hey guys, and welcome back to part two of our Blender resources tutorial video. So today we're going to continue talking about what we talked about in the last video about Blender resources, and this video is going to be more about resources that can be used with Blender indirectly, and I'll explain more of what I mean in a second. But before I get to that, I need to mention two sites which I forgot to mention in the last video. I'm sorry about this, but I realized after recording that I hadn't done these, and I decided I would just cover them quickly in the next video. So this first one I have open right now. I know it's not used as much anymore, but I know that it is still used. And this is the Blender Open Material Repository. And it's basically a place where if you can't seem to get a material just right, or you need help making material, you just don't want to take the time to make a material and you're just testing something, you can go here and basically search a material and find it. You can also browse around the database of materials. See that currently are 659 materials in 20 different categories, and it does still grow. There's also a place where you can, if you need to have a material and there's not a material you can find on the site, you can ask, or, suggested material, and then if someone else knows how to make it, they'll submit it, and then it's up for download, and the material you can download and then append to your Blend file and use that material for whatever you need. So I thought that was one of the things I missed over in the last video, and I thought I would just quickly cover here. The other one would be Blend Swap, which is a pretty major one. And right now, I'm sorry I can't show you actual site because they're currently porting the site to version 5 and moving stuff over, but it does look really cool. It's what Blend Swap is basically a place where you swap blends with other people. And it's basically a place that's a model repository for Blender files, or a repository for just effects in Blender. Like if you need to have like some kind of vector lens glare and they have a template for that in Blender, it'll be up here, and then you can download it and you can use it in your own Blender files. Or if you need a model or a base mesh of a human, you can get that here as well. Currently, like I said, they're offline and, doing everything, but you need an account to download now because there was a time when people were downloading a lot and the server's bandwidth couldn't hold up. So now you have to have an account to do it, but it's really not that big of a deal. And it's great to have an account because you can post your own blends as well, and people can give you credit for stuff and comment on it and, like your stuff and all that. And then it's also a great way to upload tutorial like blend files for other people, so you don't have to put it on Mediafire or another uploading site that, at any point it could go down, whereas Blend Swap is usually very reliable. And it's used by a lot of the Blender community, and there are almost always new blends every single day. All right, so now we'll get into the actual meat of our video today, which is programs to be used with Blender. And the first one I have up right now is GIMP, GIMP.org. And GIMP is basically an open source version of Photoshop. And if you don't know what Photoshop is, that's okay. We're about to talk about what GIMP and Photoshop are right now. So basically, GIMP is a photo editing tool, but the great thing about it being open source is that there is a feature in GIMP that allows people to write their own version of filters with a program called ScriptFoo. I don't know what language it is in. I think it might be in Ruby or Perl, but it could be in something else. It's not in Python like Blender, but it's something fairly similar. I can't remember anyways at the moment, but it's really cool because there's also a GIMP material, or not material repository. That's what I just talked about. Would be a GIMP plugin repository or filter repository where you can find plugins that make normal maps for Blender and just AO maps for Blender and all sorts of cool plugins. And if there isn't a plugin out there, you can always write your own. And I think ScriptFoo, I've done some basic stuff in it, and it seems fairly easy to use. And I do know some basic commands, so that's pretty cool. Our next one we have is Inkscape. And this one, not as much, but it is nice to have an SVG editor or a vector graphics editor. And if you don't know what that is, I have a tutorial explaining it on my channel. You can just go to my channel and search vector graphics, and if I remember, I'll put a link in the description, although I probably won't. But yeah, it's pretty much comparable to Adobe's Illustrator, which is also another vector image editor, and it allows us to make vectors and then import them into Blender as curves or paths or something. And yeah, it's really similar to Illustrator, Corel Draw, Xara Z or X. I've never really used it, but I've heard it's a pretty good program as well. So then we're going to go over to our next one, which of course we've been comparing everything to, and is the cream of the crop, I guess, of as far as editing stuff goes, which is Adobe products. And this is, the main site, adobe.com. I'll put a link to it in the description like all of these. But yeah, Adobe, Photoshop, Illustrator, Fireworks, DreamWorks, I guess DreamWorks and Fireworks, or I guess at least DreamWorks not so much because that's an HTML editor for Blender use. But Adobe has a bunch of products that are used a lot in combination with Blender in the professional field. So that's just something to consider as well. But Inkscape and GIMP are just two free choices to the Adobe option, which Adobe is expensive, but I think it's well worth the money you would spend. Another one is MapZone by Algorithmic, and Algorithmic is actually a really cool company. And if you have time, you should check out their main site, which I think is just algorithmic.com. They make some really cool products, but MapZone is really cool because it's basically a node-based texture editor that makes really good procedural textures or non-procedural textures, and it's free. It's not open source, but it's free, and it's a really good editor. I don't have it on this computer right now, but I've had it on a previous computer, and I played around with it, and it is really great for making textures because when you output a texture, it'll automatically calculate a normal AO, normal, ambient, diffuse, specular maps, and the whole 9 yards of texture mapping for you with just simple dragging and dropping, even of pictures. And that's really cool. It can auto make textures for you, or you can go more in depth with the nodes and especially custom make your textures and add random variables and smart tiling to your textures. And that's pretty cool as well. Now, this is another thing, and this one is not really directly with use of Blender. It's more like Unity is using Blender, or using Blender with Unity. And Unity, which is Unity 4, has just come out, or soon, I think. I think it has come out. But Unity 4 is basically a game engine. And a lot of people do use Blender or Maya or 3ds Max with Unity to make their models and then import them into Unity to make them into games. And Unity, I have it on this computer. I'm not going to show it to you at the moment, and I might make tutorials on it at some point, but it is a really cool program, and it's pretty close to a AAA game engine, which is, that technical, highest tier of game engine you can get. CryEngine and Unreal are both AAA game engines. But we're going to go over to our next one, which is Audacity. Audacity. There we go. Audacity is comparable to Pro Tools. It's an audio editor, open source and free, which is really great. I have it here. I'm not going to open it, but I don't use it very much because I'm not a sound person. If you all know some other videos from my channel, you can probably tell that. But when I do use it, it is very helpful, and I think you can write filters for it, and you can definitely, I think there is a filter repository, although I've never actually been to it, but I assume that there is because I know you can get filters online. Whew, just a bunch of tongue twisters today, not even. But Audacity is pretty great for sound editing, and I think there is also an add-on plugin kind of thing that you can use with Blender and actually use Audacity and Blender at the same time to refine your sound editing in Blender, but with Audacity tools. I don't know, I've read about it, but I've never actually experimented with it, and so that's something cool you could check out as well. The last site we have here today, and if there are any other sites, you can write about them in the comments, but in this last site, we have freesound.org, which pretty self-explanatory. You can get sounds for free, and it has sound effects of just about everything. And you don't have to pay for it. That's the best part. It's kind of like similar to Pond5, which is another place where you can buy sounds or sound effects. And Freesound has tons of community members, and they have tons of really good sound effects. And it's actually, when I do usually have good sound design, I guess, with quotations in my videos, it's usually because I've used Freesound. I've only recently found out about it, and I've used it a lot since I have. And I definitely think it's a valuable free resource to use with Blender. All right, well, that ends this second part of this tutorial. I hope you, or not tutorial, but I guess video. I hope you guys have learned about some new stuff. And even if you haven't, I hope you guys had a refresher of sites that you may have forgotten about. And I hope that you guys will use these resources in the future. And thanks so much for watching. Bye.